Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get started, first I'd like to thank you for watching and ask if you find this video useful and enjoyable if you hit the like button. And also if you feel like the content was valuable and you'd like to revisit my channel, why don't you hit the subscribe button. Let's talk about what our topic is, and the topic today is filing. And so I'm going to show you a couple of different kinds of files that I use primarily, how to use them most effectively, and some pitfalls that people run into that cause them to have trouble getting a nice flat surface on things. So with that being said, let's get started. So I've laid out the two different kinds of files on the table here that I use primarily. The bigger one here is a single cut bastard file. Sometimes they call it a mill file. And the characteristic that's important to me about this one is that it has teeth that cut in one direction, and they're relatively they're not as aggressive as some files because of the one direction thing. Some files are cut to where you can file back and forth like this. These ones that I use are designed to just cut in one direction, and that's when you push the file away from you. The whole back and forth motion thing that people have a tendency to do with files is actually counterproductive when you're using this type of file. I usually, when I'm using this type of file, push in one direction, don't do the follow-through thing, and then pull it straight out and then do the next stroke like that. That seems to be the best way for me. You can use the double cut ones, but they don't leave quite as smooth of an edge on them when you do that. And also, people have a tendency, knowing that they can cut in both directions, to file kind of haphazardly, which ends up leaving you with not a very good edge on the thing that you're trying to flatten. So that's the first primary file. The second file I use is a half-round jeweler's file. So by half-round I mean it's got a curved surface here, it's got a flat surface on this side, and it's got a nice sharp corner going along either edge like that. So it's ideal for getting into little tight nooks and crannies on your piece that you might need to clean up a little bit. These generally come in a set of 10 or 12 of various different shapes, round and square and triangle and stuff like that. From my experience, I rarely ever need anything but the half-round one because it's got all those different surfaces on it. So I think you can save yourself a little money if you can find these individually. I know Rio Grande, for instance, carries them individually. On the other hand, it's not a bad idea to have one of those sets of files too, because there is an occasional situation where you want a nice round rat tail file where you can get inside of a hole nicely or something. But for the most part, this one works really well for most purposes that are small. A couple of things to talk about as far as when you use which one. From my perspective, the bastard file removes material much more quickly than the little tiny file, and in my opinion it's also easier to control the angle of the edge of the file. Okay? With maybe if I had a little handle on this it might be a little bit easier, but this has a tendency, because it's smaller, to move back and forth like that a little bit. This one is easier to hold in a single flat plane like that, so it makes it easier to get a flat surface then. So okay. So the rule of thumb is, if you can use this one because it does things faster. If you absolutely can't find a different way to do it, go with this one. For instance, if I was going to file the end of this piece of wire flat, if I was using this one, not only would it take a really long time, it's hard to keep that at a perfectly 90-degree angle just because of the two different movable pieces here. For me, if I'm trying to flatten that edge, I'm going to use the bastard file, and there's a couple of ways, things to do to help you to get a nice flat edge. Okay. One is I put my forefinger on the back of the file's blade like this, and I will use that as kind of a balance point. Okay, that's step one. Step two is whatever you're holding, hold it pretty close to where the file is. Okay. The third thing is, don't put a huge amount of pressure on the piece, because that causes it to catch and chatter like this, and it makes you have kind of jerky filing motions. And what you really want to do is have a nice smooth filing motion that leaves a clean edge there. So if you use a little bit less pressure and let the teeth on the file do the work, and just let it glide along there, it tends to give you a better surface. Okay? Of course, it makes all sorts of terrible noises when you're filing, which everybody hates. But so that's the first thing is doing kind of not a lot of pressure and taking your time and doing it slowly. Okay? Another thing, if you're doing something that is longer in one dimension than another, like this pattern wire, which is sort of half round shaped, some people, because they can't avoid having you have a tendency to follow through at the end of the file stroke, and people forget not to do that. What it does is it causes the end of the wire to have a curve on it. So it's got kind of a peak in the middle and drops off to either side, and that has to do with people kind of the natural motion of their arm like that. So so that's another reason that slowing down and not pushing very hard makes you think about what you're doing a little bit instead of just, you know, going after it like that. So real slow and easy is a good way to go. Okay. Another trick that people do is if you turn it at kind of a, instead of keeping it at parallel with the table like this, if I turn the wire so it's at like a 45-degree angle like this, I seem to get a nicer edge on it. I know many people brace things against something when they file. If that works for you, that's great as well. I'm one who files kind of up in the air like this. I actually tell people, you know, to do the 45-degree thing like this, to go slow, and at the end of their stroke, stop, pull it straight out, restart a stroke like that. And just keep doing it like that. If I'm doing it without thinking about it, the way I kind of naturally do it, I actually pull the piece towards me and move the file at the same time. And that just seems to be the kind of way that I've developed over time to make a pretty decent flat side. So you're going to end up with some little burrs on the edge of this, which is little chips of metal that have been filed off, and they kind of stick on the edge. So sometimes you can pick those off of there so you can get a better idea. If you want to check to see how straight your edge is, this is where people in my classes have a lot of trouble. Sometimes they're looking at a piece of wire from a side that has pattern on it like this, and that confuses your eye a little bit. It makes it hard to see how straight that is. So I usually look at the flat side and I put it against something contrasting in color. Like if I'm having a class, I usually use somebody's shirt and hold it up against that and look at it that way. But since we're doing it on video here, I'm going to do this against a black background so you can kind of see the edge there. And it's relatively straight, but the second thing I want to do before I decide that it's good enough is I'm going to move it in the light. Okay? And if I move it in the light and it looks like there's any little cut marks left over from the cutters, then I want to keep filing. Or if there's multiple facets reflecting the light, that means I don't have a very flat surface at all. So I would want to go back and hit it some more. You know, just do it a little bit more. So slow and easy, light on the pressure. If you need to, turn it at a slight angle like this to keep you from getting a hump in the middle. And at the end of your stroke, pull it straight out and start a new stroke like that. That seems to be the best way for me. Okay. So now if you move it in the light here, you can see it's pretty flat. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on the video or not. Some other things you can use the bastard file that I use pretty frequently are, it's got a nice 90-degree angle here on these edges as well, and it's got teeth on the side. Cheaper files sometimes you'll find that don't have teeth there, so make sure you get one that has teeth on the side too, because I find it pretty frequent that I need to make a sharp angle in a piece of wire, and so you can use that 90-degree angle there in order to cut a notch diagonally in the wire. This is just a piece of 14-gauge scrap I found laying around. And I'm not sure if you can see that or not at this level, but I've cut kind of a 90-degree notch in there, and then when I'm gonna, that's diagonal, and then when I go to bend this like this, it'll allow me to make a nice sharp corner, and all I have to do is solder that right there. So that's a little trick you can do. Okay. If you're doing the insides of rings or something where you need to clean up where there's an excess of solder left over from the solder joint, these little needle files work great. If it's a bump of solder, I would avoid using the rounded side on these ones because it's going to keep trying to jump off to either side of it. But just use the flat side. Now these ones are double cuts, so it's okay to go back and forth. So, oh, one last thing to save yourself some issues on filing. Depending upon the kind of wire cutters that you use, I have these Zurons here, which I've been using for years. And I like them because they cut flush on this side here, which is the side that looks kind of flat, leaves a flattish edge, whereas the other side leaves a beveled cut. So typically there's a beveled cut left over from the last time somebody cut some off of this wire. And in order to save myself a little bit of filing, I'm going to use the side that cuts flat and point it towards the piece I'm going to be filing and snip off that little end there. And now you'll notice, I don't know if you can see it with the resolution of camera I have here or not, but these cut sort of flat, but they're never lined up perfectly, so sometimes there's a little ledge there, and you got to file all the way down until that's gone. So, but still, it's much better than that big long beveled cut that's left by the other side. So it'll take you a lot less time to get that file back down. I hope you found those filing tips useful. If you did, would you consider hitting the like button? If you really enjoyed it and felt like it was a useful place to visit, would you hit subscribe on my channel? And feel free to share it with others if you enjoyed it and thought it was a useful video. So thanks for stopping by, and happy silversmithing.